Yes, possibly. Yeah.
We're one of the few that go on at 5 a.m. Eastern time, but I guess we're at, what is it, 10 or 11?
It is 10 a.m. in London here, so
10
it's
a.m. in
much easier
London.
for me.
So live from London, the Dr. Kiltz 5 a.m. meetup. And we got our moderator, Aliyah, today. And we're going to be talking about carnivore, longevity, and all of the other secrets that Dr. Abs has been sharing around the globe. So what's our hashtag today?
Dr. Abs. Hashtag Dr. Abs.
Go on then.
Yeah.
What are we giving away? I believe in honor of Dr. Abs, we need to give away liver supplements, electrolytes.
Electrolytes, let's go for it.
We'll go for electrolytes, everybody.
We can give away our electrolyte mix.
Yeah, we'll do the electrolyte mix today.
We'll give electrolyte mix. Actually, someone was asking about transitioning to carnivore, and they're hooked on Diet Coke. Right. And it was like, well, I'm not ready to give up the Diet Coke. And actually, I was thinking you could go right to the electrolyte mix with a little bit of stevia. That'll kind of give you a temporary fix while you're transitioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
What are your thoughts, Doc?
I agree, because a lot of the time, when people crave carbs, it's not always because of the carbs, it's because we need the electrolytes as well. Some people get the cravings for like McDonald's fries. Is it the actual fry, or is it the salt on the fries that you need? And it's no coincidence that when you see people who are in the transition phase, who start to have a little bit of craving, they learn by themselves sometimes to mix a little bit of salt in the water, they have it, and the craving goes away. So I think if you can take a bit of the electrolytes, but also feed a little bit of the sweetness as well, you're ticking the sweetness box for your brain, but you're also reducing the craving going forward because you're having the salt. So I think that's a great idea.
So, Dr. Abs, would you give our listeners, both on Kiltz Mighty Tribe, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, a little introduction of yourself and your passion and drive of life?
Of course. So initially I started out as a dentist, much like Weston Price. I saw certain things that I thought, this is not right, or what's this? But he'd already done the work, because I think he's a far more important man than I am. And I read his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I learned a lot more about nutrition and obesity. Then I understood more about metabolism. And then eventually I got deeper and deeper and deeper into bioenergetics and into the mitochondrial health. And today I'm a consultant in biotech research. I work in cosmetic and longevity medicine. There are days where I have, 8-hour meetings on one single enzyme, like PGC1 alpha or something, which are very, very nerdy. And so I look into the scientific side, look into the biochemical side of cell function optimization. And it was a side effect of that I ended up going carnivore, because I study molecules like NAD so much. And things like that starts to do, in my opinion, they start to deplete when you have a balanced diet, because of the clogging up of the metabolic pathways before you get to the Krebs cycle. And so carnivore wasn't an intention for me. It was a byproduct of looking deeper and deeper into cell function. And that's where I am today.
Is science accurate?
Science can be accurate in certain instances. And in certain instances, it's impossible for it to be accurate. And there are times when it can only be theoretically accurate. So, for example, when it comes to nutrition, we can only be theoretically accurate because we can't prove things with nutrition. I'm sure people in this community understand that control in nutrition is basically zero, because you can't control for something like that. And if you can't control the variables of the test very easily, your accuracy of the conclusion of the test can only have a very limited accuracy as well. So in this particular space of nutrition, I think the level of accuracy in terms of cohort studies is very low, but it's not that problematic as people think, because a level of accuracy of your individual N=1 study at home is 100% accurate. And I think that's what's important for people.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about why carnivore, why you're talking so much about it, why you're practicing this way of living, way of eating, and how it's helped you and how it can help others
Sure.
live better and we're talking about living longer also.
Sure. So I was very fortunate, and I'm very blessed that at university, one particular tutor of mine, on just as a side thought one day, mentioned something called the glucose fatty acid cycle. I don't know what it was. I was, one of the most terrible students in the year. I didn't really pay attention, but I just remembered it for some reason. And then one day, when I saw some changes in my patient's gum disease when I was a dentist, we didn't have any dental treatment. It just went by itself. And they explained that they are essentially, what I now know to be keto and carnivore. I remembered that glucose fatty acid thing. And I thought, what? I Googled that. And that's where the whole journey started. And when you understand that, is not that I fully understand it, I don't think anyone does, but when you understand it better than the average member of the public, like I do, you see that trying to process macronutrients in the body has a particular outward effect on the other pathways. So it's like a zero-sum game. In order for you to win a game of football, the other team has to lose. When you're trying to do carbohydrates and fats at the same time in the body, that's a zero-sum game to an extent, like a sliding mechanism, sliding scale. And so when you have that and they're stopping and they're punching each other in the face to be digested first, then the input into where we produce our energy currency, our ATP for the body, then start to deplete. And I started studying what happens when you give patients NAD+, and I use it, and I'm probably the biggest user in the UK of NAD+ right now. And what I noticed was when you start to give this molecule, people's problems start to reduce. People's feel amazing. People's energy levels rise. And most people will jump and go, oh, that's fantastic. Let's give everyone NAD. I thought the opposite, because the perspective that people should have when they look at carnivore and do things like that is, or any kind of diet, is, well, if you're giving, let's say, iodine and you feel better, well, it probably means you had an iodine deficiency. So if you're giving NAD, then it means you probably had an NAD deficiency if it makes you feel better. When I started doing that, I realized something is depleting the Western hemispheres or the Western society's NAD, because this shouldn't work, but it does work. And then I understood more about the glucose fatty acid cycle. And so carnivore comes from that sphere, because when you're on an unbalanced diet and there's no punching in the face, between the carbohydrate and the fat, then we don't have that drop in the NAD level. And then we can, we're bioenergetically much better off. So carnivore for me is the answer to, in my career, why I found people deficient bioenergetically, because it is the opposite of that. And so that tells me, well, it must be that we have to eat that way. And when you look at the fact that organs perform better on ketones, and you can't be in a state of ketosis if you've got a high insulin to glucagon ratio, and carbohydrates create that, well, that's just another, clue in the detective's journey that we're going on. Sorry for the long answer.
No, we love this. We love this. Well, is meat inherently poisonous and harmful for humans?
Meat inherently, I would say, is not. But when things have been done to the meat and it contains products as a result of poor farming practice, that's a different question. And even then, it's not the meat that's the problem. It's the things we've added to the meat that may be the problem. So meat inherently, I don't think is. But even if meat, has not been farmed fantastically well, I think that's still better than the alternative of having, say, a standard Western diet as well.
Is a plant-only diet healthy for humans?
I think a plant-only diet could be argued as being healthier than a standard Western diet and a standard omnivorous diet, if you want to think of it in that perspective. But it's not as healthy as a carnivore diet, in my personal opinion. So I think it's not the worst, but not the best.
Inherently, are plants live organisms that don't want to be eaten?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the mechanisms that Darwin wrote about on the origin of species, it's not complicated to understand that in order to survive, you have to have some kind of advantage over your evolutionary counterpart that is also trying to survive. And that's not limited to human beings and animals. It is, plants as well. The only things that don't have that are inanimate objects like rocks, right? Because they're obviously not a living organism. And so plants, when you look at the fact, Anthony Chaffee is the best guy for this. I just want to do a big shout out to him. But when you look at the fact that some of them have obvious mechanisms, there we go. Some great books there. When you look at some of them have obvious mechanisms of defense, like a Venus flytrap, it's very easy to understand. But you don't have to look at that and think, well, that's the only one that has it. They all do. They're biochemical defenses, whereas animals' defense is the outer area. It's the claws, it's the teeth, it's the strength, etc., etc. So by the time you get to the meat of an animal, it means you've bypassed the defense, which means the meat doesn't need to contain toxins and poisons and anti-nutrients. And that's why it's okay to eat that. Whereas a plant doesn't have anything to, on the outside, like claws and teeth and strength. There may be some exceptions like cacti, etc. But for the purpose of this context, that is everything. And so they must then immediately go beyond that layer into the toxin if they've got nothing else.
Should we, is our quest for longevity, or should it be for health and wellness?
Oh, great question. I want to contextualize that answer by saying what people's perspective on longevity should be, so the answer makes sense. Longevity isn't about doing this particular thing and adding 10 years to your life. I am of the opinion that that doesn't exist. I think we have a maximum potential of how long we can live based on ideal phenotypical conditions, based on our individual genetics, which we can't change after we're born. And then if we do, let's pick a crude example, if we become an alcoholic and smoke 50 cigarettes a day, etc., all we're doing is taking away from that maximum potential. So I think longevity isn't about adding years, it's about living up to your potential number of years. And that comes, when you think of it in that way, from not doing things that take away years. In other words, it's a byproduct of simply being the healthiest that you can possibly be. And I think they're the one and the same thing.
And I know there's some questions here, Ali. I want to make sure.
Can I ask a question first? I have a question
please.
Okay, so I love taking niacin. I know supplements, whatever, but I love niacin. Yeah. But isn't that like a forerunner of NAD+? And would I get the same benefits, or would I get better benefits if I tried the NAD+?
I think you would probably be, in my opinion, you would probably be worse off. Because, and I did a little webinar on this, that I'm going to use the same example if anyone was in that webinar. I'm holding a pen on camera for those listening but not watching. There's two parts to the pen, the writing part and the lid. Let's pretend the whole thing is NAD+.
Okay.
So that the lid on itself and the writing part by itself can be considered precursors or forerunners.
Yeah.
Let's say I give this to someone's body, just the writing part. Okay, they have this. The body then has to find a lid. Okay, it's found one and it puts it on, and now you've got NAD. But that lid existed over here, which means the process it was due to be used for, as determined by the body in 4.5 million years of evolution, is now deficient in a lid because you've done this. So a company will sell you the precursor and say, look, the body puts a lid on it. Now you've got NAD over here. What they don't show you is the area the lid came from, which is now one lid short. And that's the problem with precursors. Even methylation groups, you have to look at that. And if you're giving precursors or even the NAD, are you depriving methylation groups from elsewhere? And so I am of the opinion that when you look at a final molecule versus a precursor, what you have to understand is you don't just look at what's made, you look at what could not be made. And the most famous essay on this is how much of a nerd I am, but there was an essay from the 19th century by Frederick Bastiat, and it was called That Which Is Seen and Which Is Not Seen, or words to that effect. I think it was in French. And it said, imagine you run a bakery shop. A child throws a stone through the window and you've got a broken window. And now you have to spend money on fixing that window. And a politician may come along and say, look at the economic stimulus that's been made for the window industry. But what you can't see is the fact that that money for fixing the window was actually going to be used for an oven so it could increase the business. And so there's no new economic stimulus. It's just gone from one place to another.
Okay.
But you don't realize that because you only see the window. You don't see what could have been. And when you see the NAD from precursor, you don't see what could have been had those resources not been used for what the body determined was the best thing to do. So I'm always of the opinion, based on the research and in the lab that I work in, but also clinically, that the final molecule is always much, much better.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies it for me. So I should try that NAD plus and stop ripping off the pen caps from the other areas.
Exactly.
What is NAD?
Oh yeah, somebody asked that.
So NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's a molecule that is used in the process of turning food to ATP, food to energy currency, if you like. So just give me 1 second. I think the door's just open. I will literally 10 seconds.
Go. We have Dr. Abs here today. He's an expert in health and wellness, longevity medicine. He's a scientist. He's a dentist that really is focused on your health and wellness. So we're really grateful for his time here today to share his wisdom.
So sorry about that.
What is NAD?
So nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, if you think about, you're going into an arcade and you want to play on all these machines, but you have to spend tokens to play on the machines. Well, now let's stick with that analogy and transfer it to biology. The arcade is your cell, and all the machines that you want to play in is all the apparatus inside the cell. And all the apparatus are used to do things like process toxins, break down food molecules, produce collagen, produce hormones, every single thing that your body needs to do. So if you walk into a cell and you want this to make testosterone or that to make collagen or this to start the autophagy process or anything, okay, well, you need to put a token into those machines. And the token in the cell context is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And there are reasons why that ends up being the energy currency. But in order to make that token, NAD is used to produce that. NAD bridges the gap between things like an individual glucose molecule and an individual fatty acid molecule and the final ATP. And that's why it's so crucial as a view on cell function. And that's why it is so highly linked to diet as well. In fact, you can only make NAD from the diet. There is no other source. And so if you've got a problem with your NAD, you must understand there is a problem with your diet. And here's a really crucial thing. I have many patients say, oh, I'm really healthy. I eat great. I exercise, blah, blah, blah. And then they take NAD and say, oh, I feel fantastic. And I say, well, if that means you were deficient in the first place, because if you had no deficiency, taking NAD would put you into overdose. I can't really take NAD anymore, because if I do, I'll go into overdose territory. That tells me my body's doing great, as determined by Mother Nature, not my opinion. Whereas if someone thinks they're healthy, take NAD and feel great, it means they were deficient. So it's simply a stepping stone to make the energy tokens that we can spend for every cell in the body to do a job. I hope these analogies aren't too patronizing for people.
No, I think they're perfect.
Okay.
I mean, for me, sorry, I can't speak for all 150 people watching, but I'm like, yay, I understand.
Do any of the national or global experts have proof that supplements are important for us to take?
No, I would say from an objective standpoint, no, because a supplement is, something that, first of all, if you need a supplement, it means your diet's not good enough. Let's be honest here. And second of all, there are no guidelines based on fully controlled studies in nutrition for reasons which, you can't do in any context. And so when you look at the history of guidelines, sometimes they were done on, soldiers during a war to prevent them getting deficient in things. Sometimes they're based purely on the borderline between deficient and not deficient in terms of symptoms. So how do you know that those guidelines exist to keep you optimal versus just not deficient? And how do you know it's right for you and not the other person? And so for those reasons, I think most guidelines aren't really worth the paper they're written on. They may have some, positive part of them, but on the whole, I'm not sure they're worth listening to personally.
And on our Instagram, there are going to be some questions covered on Instagram and Kiltz Mighty Tribe. So you guys put them in the Q buttons or just write in the comments. A question from Nicholas Roy. Do you want to read that, Alia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do carbs or plants create cavities?
So they don't create cavities per se, in the same sense that heat doesn't create fire. Heat is one of the trifecta that has to go with oxygen and fuel to create fire. Carbs or plants are part of a number of factors that as a group, if combined, could lead to a cavity. You need the substrate, such as the carbs in plants, you need the correct bacteria, and you need time. And if you have all those things, then there is a possibility that a cavity or a bit of tooth decay or caries, for the technical term, could be created. Yeah.
Is the N of 1 more important than the prospective randomized double-blind placebo-controlled studies of modern science?
100% yes. Because even if you have the most perfectly designed study, if the people in the study do not represent your individual makeup as a human being, then it's very difficult to transfer those findings. You know, if you do a study on elephants, people will very correctly say, well, how can we transfer the finding of that to a human being? And I agree. I think everyone would agree. But you have to have that same critical eye from one human being to another human being as well, in my view, anyway.
And so what we're finding is in modern science and medicine, you went in dentistry, I went to general medicine in order to help and heal people. But in our training, we're really taught to be a mechanic, to sort of diagnose disease and then treat it with some sort of surgical procedure or medicine. But what do you think we failed at in our education, or a direction, or where we're at in just standard medical practices?
I mean, it's one word: diagnostics. That's all it comes down to for me. I'll give you a very people will think I'm being flippant, but I'm not. I'm being serious. If you take, for example, let's say blood pressure. You know, if someone has something wrong with their blood pressure and they're given ramipril, as an example, which is a drug, was their problem caused by a lack of ramipril? Yeah, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being serious. Clearly, the answer is no, right? So it's not actually treating the root cause. By its very inherent nature of prescribing a drug, you are covering things up. Diseases aren't caused by lack of drugs. And when we decide we have to give a drug, we are inherently creating a dangerous thought train, I think, because you're not actually treating the root cause. And if we don't treat the root cause, we're not actually helping people get better. I've had patients who have been, you know, diabetic with blood pressure, arthritis, all manner of cofactors, who have been treated by the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK. It's a kind of socialized healthcare system we have in the country, for years and years and years. And I said, well, so you're not diabetic anymore? You've not got all these conditions? I say, well, no, I do. I said, well, what have they been doing all this time then? Just keeping you on drugs. And you know, it will take me sometimes several months to achieve a result which they couldn't achieve with 5 years in the NHS. And that's the problem. If you don't have the correct diagnosis, you aren't going to make the correct treatment plan. The diagnosis is not lack of drugs at all.
Love it.
And isn't really the problem that we've been trained based on cartoon marketing for a healthy diet, and the tobacco industry, which now controls not only the food industry, but probably the pharmaceuticals. But maybe it's the same kings and queens around the world that like to control the money, the message, and the masses, that they want to keep us weak and meek and sick. And ultimately, individually, what you're sharing is giving us all power to take care of ourselves and realize that we're simply poisoned by the propaganda of a plant-based diet.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. You mentioned the word money. A lot of it comes down to money. You know, I stand up in conferences, or let's take the cosmetic side for a second, because it happens there as well. I stand up in conferences, in cosmetic conferences, international conferences, and I show pictures of my cases, for example, before and afters of skin problems. And they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. How did you do that? That's such a bad problem the patient had. And I said, well, I don't use any skincare. I didn't use any treatment. I didn't use any lasers. I didn't use anything. I just changed the diet. And the penny drops that if they do that, they make no money. And that's why there's so much resistance as well. You know, I've had patients with severe conditions, and all they paid is for my time in a consultation. Maybe they've had a couple of consultations, but that's it. They haven't paid thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands for clinical treatment. But that's the truth. You know, even if you want NAD, newsflash, NAD is free If you can get into ketosis, you get it for free with none of the problems of any bad supplements or precursors or lack of third-party testing or anything. Most of longevity and cosmetic is free. But that's a dangerous thing for an industry that makes a lot of money, in my view.
So the complicated science that we've all been taught, and I question even our metabolic, all the metabolic processes that we've labeled, because think about all the scientists trying to get their PhD in a laboratory that are saying, well, we got to study this, this, and this. And the theoretical sciences, and ultimately what you're saying is simplicity back to our ancient roots, which we maybe came from a tree at one point, but evolutionarily speaking. But maybe you could talk a little bit about our evolutionary roots on were we primarily hunters and consumers of animal products, or were we mostly grazers and consumers of plants?
I think it's a good question, because if you understand that question, there's not really any doubt in what we have been designed to do by the process of evolution. The answer actually changes depending on how many years back you want to go. If you go back far enough, we were tree dwellers and we were most likely plant eaters. And I think most people would actually agree with that. Yeah. And I would say the teeth are actually very showing of that because of the morphology of certain teeth that we have. Doesn't mean we're actually herbivores as human beings. No, it just means at some point we had tools like what you've got there in your hand, spear. So when we came down from the trees, one benefit that we had is that when we started to eat meat, our brains grew, and we don't have claws or pointed teeth, but we have something even better, which is intelligence, because we can make tools. We can use social intelligence, and that's at that shift in our timeline, we became meat eaters, I think. And when the brain grew, the problem you have with an organ getting bigger in terms of the entire organism is it's like making the engine bigger on a car. Yeah, you can generate more power, but if the gearbox can only take so much, it's going to break the gearbox, and now the car's kaput. So if the brain grows bigger, we have to shift something else in the body to be smaller in terms of the energetic requirement. And so what happened, roughly speaking, based on the literature that I've read, is the gut reduced by probably about 40%. And we lost bits that we didn't need. For example, we don't have a cecum, right? We can get rid of the appendix if we ever need. So the brain grew and those things dropped. And our stomach acidity is very, very low, one of the lowest in amongst carnivores as well. And so based on that evidence, I would say for the context of today, we were almost exclusively meat eaters. And a good reference for that is Bendor 2021, which looked at what people did actually as a measurement. And if you think about it, no one argues that a T-Rex was a carnivore. No one argues that a Triceratops was a herbivore. And yet we argue about things much more recent than that. Well, how can that be? If we're so sure of things billions of years ago, how can we not be sure of things 4.5 million years ago? And it just doesn't make any sense to me when people do that.
The Komodo dragon, I think it's a previous herbivore that now is.
Really? Okay, didn't know that.
Well, no, I'm giving a little bit, because it almost doesn't matter what our anthropologic stories really are, if you think about it, because and I know that when we go carnivore, we're like, we feel better than we've ever felt before.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's a friend of mine called me yesterday. He's got prostate cancer, early stage, and he's talking about getting a robotic excision of his prostate. I'm like, well, have you done 30 days of carnivore yet? And there's such stories of the resistance that, well, I need my herbals and I need my fiber and I need this and that. And where is it the propaganda that we're really just pushed with since we were little children, and it's going back to that profit margin?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of money to be made in it. When you look at the food guidelines in terms of the food pyramid from, I think, 1977 or 1978, I won't go into it here, but people can have a Google. It's just shrouded in nonsense, shall we say, and bribery and bribing Harvard scientists, etc., etc. And when you understand that fiber comes out the other end, without wishing to have too crude a picture on people's heads,
we all do it.
Yeah, what does that mean? Like, if your body can't use it, essentially, for people that don't know, it's the difference between an alpha 1,4 and an alpha 1,6 glycosidic linkage in the way that glucose is put together. We have enzymes for one, but not the other. Okay. And that should tell you biochemically, we are not designed to put certain things in our mouth. And the reason we do it now is because of the guidelines that have been around for a long time. And they came about, I think, because of a lot of lobbying, a lot of financial motivations. And governments, I don't think, will change that. I don't think they will ever recommend a carnivore diet, because then they have to admit for the past 50, 60 years, they got it completely wrong. And I don't think they're willing to do that. That's my opinion. Again, it might be cynical, but I think a lot of people would agree, at least with parts of that.
What's your thoughts on a low carb way of living versus keto, paleo, carnivore? I mean, do we have just too much language in this that can be kind of confusing?
I think the language can be confusing for newcomers, but at the end of the day, my advice to people would be: it doesn't matter what you label it; it matters what you do. You can whatever those labels are defined as. You could be low carb today, keto tomorrow, and carnivore the next day, and then the keto the day after that, and then low carb the day after that. It doesn't matter. You're so much better off than you were before. And I watch your content, Dr. Kiltz, and I remember one time you said low carb is for the masses, but carnivore is for the elites. And I thought, what a simple way to put it, because carnivore is like the ultimate version of a keto diet, essentially. And so I would completely agree with what you said in that video a while ago.
Well, thank you. Maybe you could talk a little. What is keto diet?
So keto is basic description of a diet, which means that it is a diet that is probably going to put you into a metabolic state of ketosis at some point. Keto doesn't refer to a specific diet. It's an umbrella term. So you could be a low carber, and for today, if we define that as less than 30 to 50 grams of carbs a day, depending on what people read, you could enter a state of ketosis if you do that in a particular way. You could be a fully fledged carnivore and maybe have ice cream once a week with your kids. And technically you're still in a keto diet, because you will enter ketosis now and again. Yeah, you could even do the Kiltz ice cream technique, which I've seen many times. So it's keto. It was really just referring to an entering of the metabolic state of ketosis. That's all.
Any other questions on our?
We got tons of questions.
Let's throw some out there, because they're here for the questions. And like, subscribe, share, comment. Don't forget to go to Dr. Abs. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. These are really important for all of us, because we are the N of one, and this community is critical to help heal our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Yes. And before I get to the next question, please put hashtag Dr. Abs into the comment for today's giveaway. And wherever you're watching from, please toss that there. You get some Kiltz Health citrus electrolytes. There you go. Here's the next question.
And it does have some stevia.
And if you want organ meat supplements, I'll happily ship those to you instead. Okay, FX Trader. The most important benefit for dental health on carnivore diet is ?
So the most important benefit is the fact that there's not enough substrate in there to feed bacteria that can then release, weak acids to then demineralize teeth and therefore cause tooth decay. When you understand the fact that one of the biggest influences on nutrition I think we've ever had, whether people realize it or not, but I might be biased, but because he's a hero of mine, but I think it's Weston Price. And when you look at the fact that he stumbled across the health of people going up and down based on looking at their teeth, because that is so immediately responsive to what we put in our mouth, obviously, in terms of the food, then you understand that the most important benefit for dental health is the fact that you just don't get the problems or lack of dental health. And because that determines that's coming from what you put in your mouth, that then determines what your body receives in total. So carnivore diet is not just good for your dental health, it's for your overall health, because it represents a lack of substrate for the bacteria in the mouth, and it represents a lack of cross-substrate inhibition during the metabolic process, trying to make ATP in the body as well.
If we see too many people go carnivore, Dr. Abs and Dr. Kiltz will be out of our standard line of work, which is actually what we're working to do.
I love that.
Yes. Yes.
Working on Me asks, is oil pulling good for gum health? I don't know what oil pulling is. Maybe you can explain
Oil pulling,
that.
it's like a technique where they try and suck the oil through the gaps between their teeth. They try and use something like C8 MCT oil because it's quite antibacterial. The issue with this is you don't want to just destroy the bacteria because you're only thinking about the harmful bacteria. What about the beneficial bacteria as well? You have a gut microbiome, you have a skin microbiome, you have an oral microbiome as well. I personally would not recommend people do oil pulling. I would recommend mechanically clearing the plaque and simply eating right. And you don't need to go and do anything fancy. Just keep it nice and simple. You don't have to do anything fancy at all.
I mean, I'm assuming that the majority of our ancients didn't brush their teeth.
True.
And I think Weston Price showed that cavities were near non-existent and dental health was good. And really dental, the dentist is a modern, along with most of us in medicine, construct for the recommended plant-based low animal fat diet, which is probably the biggest killer in the world.
100%. And those of you that have spent thousands of dollars or pounds or euros, wherever you're watching from, on straightening your teeth, what Weston Price also noticed that when you eat this way, your children come out with more symmetrical faces and straight teeth. And so it's going to save you a lot of money in braces later on.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter said to me, Dad, your teeth looking better than they've ever looked. And I said, well, it's because I'm off coffee and certainly off the plants. And that's helped tremendously. Are you seeing that in your practice and your travels around the world, Dr. Abs?
It's a tricky one because most of my work is actually to teach about carnivore. It's not necessarily to speaking to carnivores themselves. But the few that I have come across who are carnivore during pregnancy and have children who also end up being carnivore, as I'm sure you've seen in your practice much more than I have, they come out very healthy, those kids. They come out very good looking. They're beautiful children. They've got fantastic straight teeth, beautifully developed arches, plenty of space for every tooth. There's no need for things to get crooked and crowded. But I would suggest that I'm less experienced in seeing that kind of thing because fertility is not my main thing. And I think you're probably a much more experienced clinician in that field than me.
Other questions?
Tons.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Anthony asks, Doctor, can you explain why we don't get fat eating fat? We run out of bile daily. I guess that's a question. Yeah.
So I think it's a great question but the question for that question is, well, why do we call it fat then? And I think that's been done on purpose a long time ago. If we called them lipids, people would not associate them with physically being fat,
right?
Which is a shame. It's a real shame. However, the reason we don't get fat when we're eating fat is because it's not about necessarily what you eat per se. It's about whether what you are eating is eliciting a release of insulin and increasing that insulin to glucagon ratio. If we increase that insulin to glucagon ratio, what happens is we go into, in layman's terms, storage mode, and we are going to save things. I'm going to store it for later. Think of it as a bear hibernating before winter or stocking up on fat for winter. It will eat as many berries and things like that as it can, because when that releases the insulin, then the bear will store that as fat, and then they'll be better prepared for the winter. Hence why berries only grow in the summer, by the way, even for us, before it was winter. Talk for another day. But because fat doesn't release an insulin response just in the way that carbohydrates do, we don't enter this storage mode. And that's why when you look at all throughout history in the scientific literature, studies on weight loss where you compare high carb to high fat, if I'm not mistaken, in every single instance, the high fat diet always lost more than the high carb diet, because it's the difference in high carbs releasing insulin or causing insulin release and the high fat not. And so fat won't necessarily make you fat. It will just give you a better fuel source to tap into. That's all.
Isn't it true that no other organism tries to be skinny?
Yeah, absolutely. We are weird as a species. We are so weird. There is no species really that tries to aim for a balanced diet. There are animals that try to fatten up for winter, That's a different thing entirely. But, you know, even the idea of a balanced diet, it doesn't exist in nature. I'm sorry, but it's just, that's weird as far as nature's concerned.
Well, let's say we're more like bears.
Yeah.
Not polar bears, more like brown bears and grizzly bears. Yeah. And ultimately we become hyperphagic in the summer, fall. We fatten up on plant products along with animal products in order to survive hibernation, migration, gestation, and all those other things. And even polar bears get fat on eating ring seals, which are tremendous fat sources, because if they don't get fat for the migration, hibernation, gestation, all those sort of things, which in fact our brains say get fat, do they not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we by evolution, we are meant to have carb cravings. You know, when patients come to me, and I'm sure to yourself, and they say, I can't stop eating these carbs, I believe you. And I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely believe you. And I get it. And I feel sorry for you, because your body is doing exactly what it's meant to do when you're having these problems. And the reason for that is because when were carbs available? Let's be critical here. Carbs were available maybe in the middle of August for a couple of weeks when the sun was out and there were some cherries and strawberries in the trees. That's it. And so because there were limited supply, it was an evolutionary advantage and a positive selection pressure to stock up on those so that you can transmute it into fat, and then you've got a better insulation for winter and better energy source for winter. That's it. But our bodies are still like that in a time where we have Uber Eats and we don't even have to get out of our chair for food to be delivered. That is processed to hell. That's the problem.
Well, so we don't work. We've been so masterfully manipulated in our lifestyles that, you know, order this and get this, store up on this. And our brain is not dumb. It's going to say yes, because if you don't, you're dead. Yeah. And so I always say there's nothing wrong with us. It's we've fallen into the propaganda of eating a non-species specific diet all the time.
Right.
Yeah. And if a patient says to me, like, I've got this problem, I can't stop eating carbs, I actually say, no. You haven't got a problem as far as nature is concerned. You're doing fantastically well. I've got a problem because I'm consciously choosing to not eat the carbs available to me. I'm the weird one. You're the one that's normal as far as nature is concerned.
So would you say that by simply beginning to focus on fatty meat, then our brain begins to function better? We're better able to see the universe, and we're better able to say no to those things that have been so harmful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with you completely. And I think it is better, but it's a difficult situation because let's say you're in a problem where, you know, your brain is not functioning properly to start with. How do you get the person to trust you and eat the meat in the first place if the brain isn't quite working right? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so that is where our clinical judgment comes in, and we treat each patient as an individual and we look at their circumstances. If they can start to eat that fatty meat, number one, the fuel for brain structure is more present. So you're better able to make sure the structure of the brain is good. If you are having fatty meat with fewer rises in the insulin to glucagon ratio, i.e. fewer carbs as well, ideally as little as possible, then you're more likely to enter a state of ketosis, and the brain can run or function better using that fuel source rather than things like glucose as well. So I think there's a twofold benefit.
Here's my theory about, so where does glucose come from in our diets?
Sure. So it's the carbohydrates that we eat, right? That are branched and we break them down.
Plants, correct?
Yes, of course. Yeah. And very, very little in the muscle, almost zero.
But there is sugar in every cell of every organism. We do know that. But ultimately, insulin is a digestive enzyme. Its job, I believe, is to make fat in the liver, and that is it. And because I believe that fat is the only fuel for every cell of our body, and glucose is never the fuel for our body. It's a glycosylating agent that I think we're missing, because is it true, and there's a question, can we live without ever eating plants?
Yes. 100% yes.
Is a high protein, low fat diet good for us?
I would say no.
No. So we know that it's actually a high fat diet that what we should focus on. That means eating, I believe, raw fat. That's why I eat butter. I eat raw meat, fatty meat, and that's so critical. And so I think our science is just so complicated that as we learn from you and others, and I always love Sean Baker. All he does is sits there and eats meat and eats the meat, and that's it. And there's no sides, and the simplicity of this. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the simplicity of a carnivore lifestyle.
Well, it's not just simple; it's natural. I use a crude, almost flippant example when I'm teaching even medical professionals. I say, think of an animal, any animal you like, and they might say, a giraffe. And I say, okay, what's the giraffe eating in your mind? I say, well, leaves. And I say, okay, well, do you ever see a giraffe next Tuesday deciding to go down to the butcher shop and have a steak because it had leaves too much for the previous week? And they say, no, they always eat leaves. And I say, well, find an animal that doesn't always eat the same thing then. And then there's a silence as the penny drops and they realize there's no such thing as a balanced diet. So it's simple because it's easier and more advantageous to have a simple diet so that you can be the best at digesting those things, which is why a balanced diet doesn't exist outside of the context of hibernation for winter in certain animals.
Let's hit this from Ostron, Pregnancy Safe Cosmetics, which I recommend everyone go and subscribe and like and share about dairy. Was it dairy, eggs?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I think dairy is always going to be a plus or minus for different people based on whether they have a lactase persistence or not, amongst other things. So typically, if you go back far enough, we could digest the lactose early on in life, and then we lost the ability to produce the lactase enzyme to break down lactose. Around the time we domesticated animals, I believe, I'm going to wildly guess it, around the time of the ancient Egyptians, perhaps, we started to have something called lactase persistence where adults could break down lactose still. And it wasn't a negative selection pressure because we had so much intelligence by then and we could survive even by doing the wrong thing like today. So I think dairy is simply based on the individual's ability to break down the lactose. If you can, great. If you can't, I don't think that's a problem. Okay, again, if you can't break it down, that's normal. I think they're the normal people because we don't have breast milk our whole life. There's a very good reason for that. And when it comes to eggs, I love eggs personally. I think they're fantastic. You can cook them in so many different ways. But again, if you can't have it, it's actually not a problem. If you feel left out, fine. But there's so many other things that you can have that you don't need to worry about. So I don't think it's a problem if you do it without dairy and eggs. It just means you've got to do it your own individual way, as we all do. I'm sure we all do.
Great. Let's take the next question.
Sure.
We've got a lot of questions. Let's see.
Well, let me just throw this in. I mean, ultimately, infants and breast milk, that's that. And then from there, it should be, bacon, eggs, butter, beef, salt. And yes, that's really it because, we're not, go suck on the tit of a cow. Is that really what we evolved to do? They'll kick you, and the other bulls will come and kill you. Right.
Yeah. I think, sure.
Go ahead, Doc.
No, I was going to say there's a reason breast milk is for babies. It's the equivalent of hibernation. A bear fattens up for winter, right? A baby fattens up because it's sort of physically very vulnerable when it's a baby. And so if it's having breast milk and it stores fat, then it's more likely to maintain body temperature, amongst other things, before it moves on to solid food. And that's the reason why I think breast milk has become the go-to choice as a result of evolution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay,
we've got like 11 minutes left. Do we have any more time today, doctors, than the next 10 minutes or?
Keep going.
Okay, keep going. Okay. I'm exercising, eating healthy keto carnivore, and my blood sugar tests are under 100, but often get low HCT under 30. Is this related to iodine, NAD, or something else? Female, thanks.
So HTC, they're talking about hematocrit, if I'm not mistaken. So what they're basically saying is there's a reduced number of red blood cells that are there. And the way I would always go with something like this is, what are your actual symptoms? Because if you're exercising and you're doing great, might be that actually you're going by references when you should go by your N=1 symptomology. And that's more important. You know, I've seen people with a higher hematocrit for certain reasons, and they just give blood now and again, and it's not a problem. If it's a low hematocrit, my first question is, what are your symptoms? Is it related to iodine and NAD or something else? I mean, most things are related to NAD, but that's not actually helpful in terms of forming a treatment plan. So my question there would be, what are the symptoms, if possible? Because if your blood sugar is great, I don't think you're metabolically unhealthy. You know, if you really want to check your metabolic profile, one thing I would definitely suggest is looking at fasting insulin or fasted insulin and see what that says, and then go from there as well.
And I think 2 to 3 days of fasting is really a fast, because most people, you still have food in the gut. It's not a fast, in my opinion. Yeah. And ketovore, I think you got to go carnivore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question from Amy Brisket Boomers. What is Dr. Ab's opinion of healing type 1 diabetes?
It's interesting. I think type 1, for those who don't know, is a type where, you know, it's the pancreas not really able to produce the correct amount of insulin that's required. And so the first thing I generally ask type 1 diabetics, apart from the levels of their HbA1c and things like that, is how much of your pancreas is still able to work? How much residual function do you still have? And the thing is, even if the function is lost, you can still be healthy. Actually, you don't. It's not a death wish or a death sentence. I would recommend do a big shout out to a guy called Ryan Attar, Attar. I'm not sure which state or city he's in the US, but he's a retired Marine sergeant who was type 1 diabetic, and his HbA1c is better than most non-diabetics. I think it was 4.5. And he does that by simply understanding the nutrition. So healing type 1 diabetes, to answer the question, I don't think necessarily you'll be able to magically bring back full function of the pancreas once it's gone necessarily. However, you can heal the problems that may cause by alleviating the stress on the residual function of the pancreas at the same time.
There was a question about do you have any toothpaste you recommend?
Not particularly. I mean, it's a good question. Personally, I'm of the opinion that what toothpaste you use is less important than how you're physically actioning the toothbrush. For example, if I took any dentist and said to them, right, you are not allowed to use toothpaste for a week. You can only use water. I would hazard a guess they probably won't get any dental problems, because they know the perfect technique and how to get everywhere in the right way. And so it's the brush that's more important than the paste. And your brush ideally needs to be a round head, because the gum contour is round. It can slip underneath slightly easier. And ideally an electric one as well, because it's going to be much better at mechanically clearing any residual plaque that's there. That's more important. Personally, toothpaste-wise, I don't even know the name of the one I use because I'm not that bothered, but it's fluoride-free, and I generally go fluoride-free personally.
Great. Next question. How to deal with hyperpigmentation around the mouth area?
If it's around the mouth, you have to question whether it's melasma, which in colloquial terms used to be called the mask of pregnancy. And if it is melasma, it's much stronger pigmentation than typical standard pigmentation. I'm going to assume this is melasma because of the pattern that they've suggested. First of all, it's not about dealing with it and getting rid of it. That's one job you've got. You have to realize the second job is to keep it from coming back, which is another thing entirely. There's no point spending money getting rid of it and then it coming back the following week or month or year. So it's always going to be a combination of different things. I think the diet is always going to be number one. You know, most of the time now, if a patient is not having a good diet, I actually don't treat them because I'm wasting my time and it's very difficult to get a result. So once you reduce the level of inflammation in the body, I generally tend to find the skin improves anyway. So there's no need to respond to inflammation. Number two, we could look at certain types of skincare to work locally with the skin as well. That could be anti-pigmentation ingredients, tyrosinase inhibitors, such as hydroquinone, et cetera, what else there may be. And we would then look at clinical treatment. because the skincare alone is going to be very, very slow, even with good nutrition as well. So in terms of clinical treatment, we could also look at some kind of energy device, like a particular type of laser. In the US, you have a company called Sciton, SCITON. No connection or sponsorship from them at all. They're just very good devices. And I've seen people with pigmentation in that area and melasma. I've seen it disappear after one session because of how good it is at destroying the melanin in the skin. So it's always going to be a combination of different things, but that's a rough guide to hopefully get you Googling the right things, shall we say.
And a lot of it is likely related to glycation.
Oh yeah.
Which is so common in the plant-based world, where there's a lot of sugars that glycate a Maillard reaction, which causes basically a darkening and cooking of your cells and tissue.
Exactly.
Apple cider vinegar. What are your thoughts on using apple cider vinegar in the diet, and or someone's asking on Instagram, can we introduce in our diet and how this can affect our teeth?
I mean, first of all, it's acetic acid that you're talking about as far as the chemistry is concerned. A lot of acid on the teeth is going to demineralize them. You know, if any of you, I don't drink Coca-Cola anymore, but when I used to, I could feel, and I'm sure everyone can, you have the drink, and if you run your tongue over your teeth, it feels a little bit chalky. It's not the same. It's not glossy. That's because you are literally dissolving your teeth there and then, and you're feeling the effects of that. And when the saliva comes back into your mouth, the reason for that is because saliva brings with it minerals that can then remineralize the teeth. Aren't we evolved so perfectly? And so if you constantly have acid in your mouth, people that start every day with the ginger and lemon or whatever, I mean, that's a perfect recipe for tooth decay, frankly. So constantly having that is not good for your teeth, first of all. And second of all, if you need something like that to get your stomach to work properly and it works, that's not a reason to keep doing it. That's a reason to say, that must mean my stomach's not working properly in the first place. Why is that the case? I need to fix the root cause. These things, I think, are tools. They're diagnostic tools, not a treatment plan.
And I mean, ultimately, acetic acid and vinegar is not a natural substance that we had in our diets for the first 3.5 million years.
For sure.
And it's another one of those supplement add-ons that we've been pushing for a long time. Can you comment about fasting?
Yeah, fasting, I think, is greatly misunderstood. Not that I'm the world's greatest expert on it, but I would say, if you have to understand what fasting is, in layman's terms, let's think of it as starvation. It's not actually starvation, but let's think of it in that way. So if you fast and you're doing better, what Mother Nature is telling you is eating nothing is better than eating what you're eating, which is a slap in the face. So if you fast and then eat the same thing again, how much better off are you really? And so I never fast. I advise on patients that are carnivore to never fast as well. And if you are carnivore, you're not doing damage to your body. So there's no reason to enter the ULK1 pathway and enter autophagy to start recycling everything, because there's no damage to repair. If you're on a standard Western diet, yes, you will see immense benefits on fasting, because you're entering that pathway, you're able to start to recycle things in your body. That's why many studies show a benefit in fasting. I don't doubt those studies. I think their conclusion is correct for the people that were studied. When has there been a fasting study on people that were not clogging up their body with crap by eating a carnivore diet? I've never seen that study. And that's why I don't think there's a point in fasting if you're carnivore. I think eat till you're full and only eat again when you're hungry. And that's all you need to worry about, if you're carnivore, that is.
I imagine in our ancient evolution, we fasted because food was, we didn't have it 24/7, 365. You had to hunt for it. And hunting is not one of those things that you're like, hey, let's go get our food and bring it home. So I think we likely fasted a lot. I practice fasting. I do it 3 days, 2 to 3 every month, 5 to 7 quarterly. I think clearing out the bowels is one of those great things, but it is, I agree with you, it's not required, especially on carnivore and fatty meat carnivore. Rare to raw carnivore is to me the best, but it's one of those hard things to do that has a spiritual process that I think is it can be powerful.
I agree. I think there are fasting. I'm talking purely from a biological context in terms of metabolic pathways. What I'm not talking about is what you just said, which I think it holds true. If you are able to achieve something like that and build mental strength, that then helps you. If that then helps you stay on carnivore when you're not fasting, because you know you're strong enough to stick to things, hey, you're actually better off on a net basis.
Cool. Cool.
Do we have time for a few more questions? Or okay,
Yeah,
okay.
go for it.
Okay, great. What about lion? What about the lion diet? All ruminant animals.
I think that's probably the ultimate, really. Beef, water, salts. I think if you can do, I can't do that. I like different meats, but I take my hat off to you. If you can do that, go for it. Do it. You'll absolutely do very, very well on it.
Great.
Can you name a disease that we've been taught that doesn't respond to a carnivore diet?
I mean, I can't think of one on top of my head. I doubt there is one. I think the only category that you could potentially argue for is a genetic disease, but that's not because of the person's fault. That they can't change their genome once they've been born. But again, that doesn't say anything about the diet either.
Well, I've seen people with cystic fibrosis.
Okay.
That because ultimately, think about it, it's a glycobiome disorder of the surfactant, which is part of the glycocalyx. And because of a high sugar, plant-based poisonous diet, you damage it even more. So we've really never studied many of these genetic disorders on a proper human diet, where will help excise all the toxins and the inflammatory particles. Plus, a plant-based diet helps those nasty microbes flourish.
Yeah,
and
true.
They go up to the esophagus, upper lower respiratory, out the rectum, anus, all over the body. And so I think we even have to rethink our genetic disorder, because I know Thomas Seyfried says, cancer is not a genetic disorder. I agree. It's a metabolic. I think it's a plant poisoning disorder in a low-fat diet, and that's really it. So cool. How about a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah,
okay, good. And then we got to do the giveaway. So put hashtag Dr. Abs into the chat for the giveaway today, and we will talk 1 second about Austin and at the end. Okay, Jonathan Michael Fay. So I'm an NAD plus and many other supplements dude. Almost 3 years, Kiltz carnivore, alcohol, drug-free, super healthy at 70. Are you saying my carnivore diet eliminates all my crazy supplements?
Yeah, all, if not nearly all. The thing with NAD plus, they're so wildly different. You can have one that is just full of garbage and one that is so incredible you can help people's disease with it. Saying I take NAD plus, very sorry to say this, but actually it doesn't mean anything. Which NAD plus are you taking? And the only supplements I take are situational. If I'm in the lab all day, I'm like a hermit. I can't see the sun. So I might take a vitamin D supplement on that day. If I'm going somewhere where I don't trust the food, I might take my protein powder because I don't trust the food. There are only situational times where I need my supplement. So I don't think they're essential personally. There are tools you can use in certain situations, but I don't think you should need things by default. That's all.
Great. Best NAD plus.
Sure, this is a great question. There was a company that I used to recommend, which I don't anymore because I think the quality has gone down. I actually don't think, and this is not the answer people want to hear, but it's an honest answer. I don't think there's anywhere in the world right now that is producing an NAD plus that I would be willing to inject in myself at all. However, it's something I'm always looking at. And if I do find one, I will absolutely, for sure, make a video about it on my YouTube and say exactly why I think it's the best.
Great. What about? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr.
ER for Angel on Instagram. My triglycerides are going up since I began carnivore 2 months ago. Should I worry?
No. I mean, for example, I've had patients who are losing weight and their triglycerides go up. It's just a byproduct of losing weight, and then it normalizes. Don't go by a blood marker. Go by what is happening to you. What are you feeling? And that's much more important.
Great. What about using water picks?
Yeah, they're fantastic. I use one. I think they're fantastic. One of the biggest issues with dental health is people not being able to clean in between teeth. When it's on the front face of the tooth, it's very easy. You can even just do that with a piece of tissue if you really wanted. But in the nooks and crannies, That's not easy. And a toothbrush, even if used by an expert, sometimes always can't reach in between, especially when teeth aren't quite straight. A water pick allows you to flush that bit out between the teeth, and you can do the whole mouth in 15, 20 seconds very easily. I think they're fantastic. I use one, but I would say to people, if you're going to get one, don't spend some ridiculous amount like $60 to $100. In the UK, I think my one is about £20, so probably $20, $25. Get the cheapest one you can. They're all the same.
Great. We'll take this last question. Sure. Dr. Abs, best way to thicken skin after atrophy. Anything further to further testosterone cream?
So what he's referring to there is a particular type of testosterone that I use in skincare. It's a testosterone that actually doesn't change hormones because it's not able to, but it is able to affect the skin cells in isolation. So you get a massive improvement in skin quality without any change in the body's testosterone. That's one thing you can do. And we also need to look at making sure the diet is optimized, so there's less inflammation. We can also look at mechanical stimulation for thickening the skin, such as derma rolling in the correct way, in the correct frequency as well. And we can also combine the testosterone cream with something like niacinamide as well, which I actually conveniently have right next to me here. This is the one I use. It's from the Ordinary niacinamide powder. It's literally about $5. Some of the cheapest stuff you can find. Niacinamide powder from the Ordinary. So I will mix that into the testosterone cream that I give to my patients. And that allows the cell to respond to the testosterone a lot better. There's a few different things you can do in terms of what's right for you individually. I would say consultation to look at your individual needs and requirements is best.
Cool. Okay. Let's do Austin first.
Okay, let's do Austin first. So I want to show the new Kiltz Health event sign-up page, because it's amazing. It has all the places Dr. Kiltz is going to be this year, and it potentially could be added to. This was Tampa, from Syracuse to Melbourne. So the next event is Healing Humanity. You can go right here and buy your tickets to the Austin event. After that, we have Yuma. Dr. Kiltz will be in Australia, Meatstock, then Seattle. So everything is going to be here. We're going to do Boston, June 28th, by the way, and I'm working on that.
Boston, sign up, be there.
Yeah, be there.
Dr. Abs, are you going to be traveling to the U.S. anytime soon?
No
maybe
plans
in September. Maybe in September per your assistant to Syracuse.
If I am, you will be the first people to know. Absolutely.
We'd love it. I hear you're an awesome. Well, we watch you all the time. Just awesome.
Oh, thank you.
And sharing of this information, and the beauty of social media. It's social medicine. It's really giving it to the people. All of us people, by the way, we are all part of the masses. We are that. But when you realize the power you have by understanding that you can change everything, I think that makes us all the kings and the queens.
Yeah, for sure. Couldn't agree more. And if you're ever in London, please let me know.
Oh, for sure. We're going to do it. We're going to come back there again. I don't know what the next meeting is, but I'll be back there. Brilliant. Cool. And how about our
giveaway? Time for the giveaway. Hashtag Dr. Abs. Share screen. Who is the lucky winner today?
And it can't be Kiltz.
I better not be Kiltz.
Did we see Dr. Nelson? Was Dr. Nelson?
No, James S. Congratulations. Woo! You need to email me at alia@drkiltz.com, all spelled out, to get your gift. And I will put that in the comments. Alia.
Pilar and Luca delivered their baby boy on Monday, 8:30, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. He's currently called Harold, but Herald, but it may be, we think it's going to be Lorenzo, but we're still waiting on the name of the baby. So that's exciting too. So
nice. But congratulations to them.
My first grandchild.
Amazing.
I'm imagining my daughter Pilar's having 10.
And there we go. This means it's time for school. When this happens, it's time for school.
And I know we've got to get Dr. Abs again on Carnivore Conversations.
We will. And on Dr. Abs' channel, we'll do that. And your assistant said you might be able to fly out to New York in September, just so you know.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're doing an event in September with Dr. Kiltz.
Okay, we'll see.
All right, everyone. Kiltz
Okay.
Instagram.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Love you.
Goodbye. Bye.